Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana, and this is part 2 of my review of X-Men and Alpha Flight issue number 2. So we're coming into the last quarter of the 2-issue crossover series between the X-Men and Alpha Flight. The two teams have divided on ethical, philosophical type grounds in respect of whether they want to allow the fire fountain, to envelop the world in its magic so that everybody achieves their kind of desire, their dream comes true. Or on the other side, you have the likes of Wolverine and Professor X, who are of the opinion that it is a gift, the price of which is not worth it, because magical beings such as Snowbird and Shaman are dying. They can't survive in a world enveloped by the fire fountain. So the teams are split. Colossus is on the side of those who want the fire fountain and its utopian promise to be defended, and they're fighting here. So Earth Mover has created a fissure beneath them. The Professor and Talisman are falling in, so of course he calls out to Nightcrawler to grab them, and also Northstar. So Northstar grabs Talisman, she is Shaman's daughter, and on the Professor's instruction he brings her to the fire fountain because her power is to negate anything magical. So kind of the incipient plan is that she should extinguish what Northstar calls this accursed infernal flame. Northstar isn't at all happy with the fire fountain and its gifts, never has been from the beginning, but they are followed by one of the Canadian exploratory team who's been transformed here, and Northstar's sister Aurora. He taps his staff on the ledge that runs out to the fire fountain and creates magically this diamond prison around, diamond crystal prison around Northstar and Talisman. And Northstar says, when Talisman tells him to escape, to fly away, he says, since the fire fountain is magic, then so must Monsieur Dominique's power be so as well. By rights then, you should be able to disrupt our prison anytime, ne sais pas. And she says, I suppose. And meanwhile, out on the ledge, what does Aurora find except for Dominique's his copybook, in which he has been drawing designs which have been realized in the magical citadel in its architecture, but also discovered by Talisman earlier in this issue. When flipping through it, she found that the imagination and skill levels dropped precipitously as she moved towards the end of the book, and the end drawings were like those of children, and he's aghast that Aurora's looking at it there, and he knocks it out of her hand so that it falls into the darkness of the pit out of which the fire fountain is spurted. Why throw them away, the designs, the drawings, asks Aurora. And Talisman says his designs, of course, remember she's seen them before. No wonder they seemed familiar. And I like the little detail there in Paul Smith's art of the pads of her fingertips touching up against the side of the diamond crystalline prison that she and Northstar are in. And she continues and says the citadel, buildings, furniture, decorations, even this crystal sphere, they're all from Dominique's sketchbook. So he tells her to shut up, I don't want to hear anymore, and she continues, that's crazy. You should be proud. Those are magical creations, far beyond the capability of any human agency, but with your power you've made them real. And then she realizes, well, that's the issue. I said magical and I meant it because that's what they were. Is this the key? The answer to transform people? Does the fire fountain consume not just the world's magic, but their own personal inner magic as well? And his reaction seems to confirm that. She continues and says, and does that magic include the ability to dream, to imagine, to truly create? So he takes off his helmet and he says, yeah, you saw the book. The last pages are nothing but scribbles. A baby could do better. It was so wonderful at first. All my fantasies could suddenly, with a wave of my hand, be made gloriously real. But then, when I ran out of sketches of things to copy and tried to come up with something new, I couldn't. So he's in despair at the loss of his ability to dream and imagine and be creative. So Aurora now has decided that this changes everything. We have to tell the others. And so the fight is continuing elsewhere, just outside the Citadel. So the fight continues, and Aurora brings Talisman, and she explains everything. So it's good we don't get a repeat of what we just learned on the previous pages. And Kitty confirms it's the same with cornucopia. Show her a recipe or a costume and she'll reproduce it perfectly, but she can't originate anything of her own. So Talisman says, those changed by the fire fountain are given power beyond their wildest dreams, but in the process they lose the ability to dream, that indefinable transcendent something that makes us human. And now we come to the moment where the god behind it all, Loki, reveals himself. And I love the way that this is handled by Claremont. He has Loki talk from the darkness of the night sky. And is that so bad a thing mortal, he says, so high a price to pay for becoming like unto a god? And there he is revealed. So he is dropping down from the heavens, introduces himself in Silver Age fashion. I am Loki, Prince of Asgard, your humble benefactor. Thanks to my fire fountain, you are no longer human. Therefore, what need have you for your so-called humanity? But Dominic there is upset about losing his creativity. And Loki tells him to have a care, manling, thou art but a little god, while I am lord of the golden realm. Take not that tone with me. Moreover, he says, Master Builder, I sense thine objections are not shared by the majority of thy fellows. For thy convenience, Paul Dominic, thy sake, should the whole world suffer? So yet another moral, ethical question here, and we can see that the members who are on Madeline Pryor's, aka Anodyne's side, are not going to agree with Dominic. They're happy with their gifts, even if they've lost their imagination. Good use of a screen tone here in the background for the night sky. Turn the page, let's continue with the story. And we have Scott Summers, and he's got something to say. He divided from his wife, Madeline, on the question of the fire fountain. And he says here, he's been thinking about everything that Talisman has revealed. And he says, what of those of us who already possess powers? We'll be no better off than before. We'll be the only ones left with imagination. We'll be the dreamers in a world that can't. How long before we're resented for that, he asks, and then hated, and then killed? In the end, we won't have changed anything, saved anyone, at least as far as mutants are concerned. We'll still be outcasts, pariahs, targets. So there will be no utopia. And Loki here is getting annoyed. You will all yield, Cyclops, he says, and then he exclaims, or you'll need not wait the hour for the hour of your destruction. It is at hand. Even your considerable might is no match for yonder snow giants. So we can see them emerging from the drifts of snow in the hills. And Cyclops gets angry. He says, you don't force people to accept gifts, mister. You have any meaning, they've got to be, to have any meaning, he says, they've got to be as freely taken as given. So Loki's not happy. We gods have ever known what is best for thee and thine, Cyclops. Why canst thou not trust me? And this is brilliant. Like, this is excellent. Look what Cyclops does. He unleashes his optic blast at a god, because Loki is known throughout all creation as the god of lies. So, bad move. Loki here is chagrined. Thou darest strike us to God. The snow giants there, they're getting ready for battle. And Loki angrily says, misbegotten mortal, thou and thy ilk shall pay dearly for such effrontery. So now we have the X-Men and Alpha Flight teaming up against these snow giants. So you have their, let's see, who is it? We have Sasquatch and I think Colossus. Yeah, it is Colossus here teaming up together and knocking over one of the giants. So they're doing well to begin with. Now turn the page and we see here that Shaman and Snowbird, they're still in dire straits with the fire fountain, which is draining their life force because they're magical type beings. They're there fleeing the crumbling citadel. Loki uses his power to set the fire fountain shooting out above the citadel so that its magic might envelop the world, which is the ultimate plan. And at this point, Rogue decides to act. She says to Nightcrawler, "You think that fire fountain is something fuzzy? Watch this." And I like this thought balloon of hers that Claremont has given her. Always wondered what my limit was. Can I absorb the power of a god? Well, isn't that a question? So she touches Loki on the face, but he manages to knock her away. So it seems like gods are beyond the ability of her mutant power to absorb their powers. Loki's immune to her. Now, have a look at this page here on the right, page 33 of the issue. Have a little look at the inking style. You can see it's different from this one. In the credits for this issue, Paul Smith is doing all the penciling. Bob Wiacek is doing some of the inking, but not all of it. There's a credit and company, Bob Wiacek and Company. Well, one of the inkers who is part of that and company phrasing is Barry Windsor-Smith. So Barry Windsor-Smith's ink line is very distinctive, but it's not just that. The way that he finishes other artist pencils, think about the way that he finished Herb Trimpe's pencils in the Machine Man miniseries, the 4-issue miniseries from, I want to say, 1984, and the degree to which Windsor-Smith's own style came out in the finishes. The same thing is happening here. Look at Madeline Pryor's face there. That is a Barry Windsor-Smith face. Also the eyes in particular. Look at the way that her body's rendered there as well. Very Barry Windsor-Smith. So there's 5 pages of Barry Windsor-Smith inks over Paul Smith's pencils, and they just look amazing. Like really, really great stuff. So what we have here is that Madeline is wondering about what to do next. Should they stand around while magical beings die? She says to Madeline, "You're a healer, Anodyne. Is this the kind of world paid for with innocent blood you want for yourselves, for your children?" "Loki's gift was my heart's desire," says Madeline. "My fondest dream come true. It didn't seem to matter that, by accepting it, becoming Anodyne, I lost myself, but I was fooling myself as our benefactor did us." So now she addresses Loki. "Do you hear, Loki? I deny your gift. I want no part of it, as I deny the false god who proffers it." So Loki's not happy at all. We're getting this upshot of him. He's huge. He's giant size. And one of the Canadian exploratory crew, the library master, pushes Madeline out of the way just as this snow giant swings at her with a mallet. And he himself takes the brunt of the blow. And he's really badly injured. This is still Barry Windsor-Smith inking over Paul Smith's pencils. So Professor X tells Northstar to grab Madeline, bring her to Mr. Ross, and use her powers to help heal him. He's on the verge of death, but her powers die out. And so Loki now is enjoying her discomfort. "As I recall, milady," he says, "thou didst deny my gift. Thou spokest with considerable passion, Madeline Pryor. Far be it from me to stand in the way of such righteous determination." So she's shocked and appalled. "You can't," she says. "Sam will die." And he feigns sorrow here, a pity truly. "I'm as touched by thy solicitude as by his plight, but there is naught that I can do, for my powers have nothing to do with the healing arts. That, dear Anodyne, was thy purview." And you can see him smiling gleefully there. She's manipulated into a situation where she's going to have to keep those powers. "I'm trapped," she thinks to herself. "No matter which way I turn, I lose." Northstar piles the pressure on her. "The man is barely breathing. I couldn't feel any heartbeat," he says. So let's turn the page here, and we get the last 2 pages of Barry Windsor-Smith's inks. These are beautiful pages. Really, really great work. You can see the way he's rendered in the starry night in the background there. So he has splashed some white paint over the ink there. Really, really fine detail in his inking over Paul Smith's pencils, and these pages reproducing really well despite the flexographic printing. So yeah, it's good stuff in the second half of this issue, and also, as I said, like Barry Windsor-Smith's inks, just amazing, just really elevating and enhancing Paul Smith's pencils. So Madeline here, she acknowledges that she is going to have to accept Loki's gift in order to heal her friend. All thy worth thou art, once again, he says to her. And then he grabs her by the neck, however, and lifts her up off the ground. I want no more defiance. My will shall be done, mortal, and thou wilt do all within thy power to aid me. Have I thy word on it? Yes. So the bargain is struck, and the tear is shed from the corner of her eye. So he casts her on the ground, and then she moves towards Mr. Ross. You're part of me, my crew, Sam, as well as a friend. I failed that responsibility once, never again. So she's thinking of the plane crash, the one that she was the only survivor to walk away from when she was pilot. And that's the end of Barry Windsor-Smith's inks. And we're back to whoever it might be, whether it's Bob Wiacek or someone else. So she heals Sam Ross, and he's going to live. But she thinks to herself, maybe it's better this way. She's thinking about her baby, her unborn baby. The poor thing will never know what he's missing. To him, clouds in the sky won't be dragons or horses or ships or castles. They'll just be clouds, she thinks. And I love this bit with Wolverine. This is excellent characterization from Claremont for Wolverine. Wolverine here, facing Loki, a god, remember, calls him out. Loki, anybody interested in a piece of what's left of this chump after I'm done with him? Talk about bravery, talk about foolhardiness. Professor X tells Wolverine to hold back, wait. The battle is over, Asgardian, he says to Loki. Your giants have lost. And so they have in the background. The X-Men and Alpha Flight working together defeated the snow giants. But Loki doesn't care. He simply says, good help is so hard to find. However, dear Anodyne hath changed her mind, ever a woman's prerogative, and now accepts my gift with all her heart. She bids you do the same. Is that not so, my sweet? So she's there crying and she says yes. And then there is Deus Ex Machina, the gods from the machine in this case. It is those who live above in shadow, who are to Asgard as its immortal sons and daughters are to the realms of men. And they have witnessed and judged and found Loki wanting. So Loki did this good deed, the fire fountain, in order to help humankind for a boon from those who live in shadow above. And now it's denied him. And he is not at all happy. So he says, I've fulfilled your terms by giving these mortals the means to make their world a paradise. And one of the ones who lives above in shadow says, and when they said thee nay, thou forced them to thy will. Be that thy concept of freedom, of goodness, by words and deeds, thou wert to prove thyself worthy of our bounty. Instead, thou hast branded thyself most manifestly the opposite. And I love this little panel here. This is really Kirby-esque, where Loki just starts losing his temper altogether, and he starts execrating, puling, pathetic maggots. Dost thou know what you have cost me? So he's about to destroy them all. But the god above says, Loki, stay thy wrath. Thou shalt harm no innocent. Thou shalt allow these thy guests to depart in peace, and further pledge, as Prince of Asgard, in thy father Odin's holy name, never do them harm in this sphere or any other. Fail in this, and thou shalt feel our vengeance. So Loki is stymied, and he swears the oath, and it's acceptable to those who live above in shadow. And so they depart, and they tell him as a parting message that the fault lies with him, not with the mortals. Pompous windbag, says Loki. That's a great expression on his face. Someday, somehow, there will be a reckoning. Mortals, my word hath been given, and, contrary to popular belief, I shall not be forsworn. But know you have made an enemy this day, whose reach is as long as his memory, and who prides himself on returning blow for blow in full measure. You've refused my most generous offer. I therefore take it back, together with every benefit derived from it. And then everybody loses their gifts. So Puck loses his size, and the pain that he's always tortured with from his dwarfism is back worse than ever. The regular humans lose their size and skills. Cyclops loses control of his optic blasts. Wolverine thinks to himself, I'm crazy again. And so, in their own way, are Sasquatch and Aurora. So everybody's back to the way they were. But Loki still holds out one last chance. This need not be. The fire fountain still burns, he says. I can yet undo all that I have done. And they all think about what's at stake. And Puck speaks for them all. He says, that fella is a cross I choose to bear. So do us a favour, Loki, and take off, eh? We ain't interested. So Loki departs, calling them fools in real Silver Age fashion. And with him fades the fire fountain, and with it the eldritch summers that has kept the shore of Ungava Bay warm and verdant. In the space of a breath, the air becomes bitter cold, and the first flakes of snow begin to fall. Great prose from Claremont there. So the snow giants steal away quietly, and the magical team members of Alpha Flight, Shaman and Snowbird, they're back to full health. Lovely little image there of Snowbird transforming into that Arctic owl, flying away and saying that the sacrifice of everyone was not in vain. Loki's gift, for all its good intent, would have cost the earth its soul, she says, leaving it perfect in form and feature, yet hollow and sterile within. In truth, that is a world and future I would have been glad never to see. So, Northstar brings Shaman his medicine bag. All the demons and monsters are back in there again. And Shaman himself says, we can yet make a difference, Heather, he says to Heather Hudson. As heroes and people, Loki's way was a quick and easy fix. Ours will be longer and harder. But I have ever believed the best things are those we earn rather than what we're given. So a nice moral lesson there derived by Shaman at the end of the adventure. And now everybody's getting aboard the airplane because Arctic storm is coming in from the mountains. And so they're under a bit of time pressure. There's a parting here between Northstar and Heather. He made a decision before this crossover to leave Alpha Flight, and he's still of that opinion. But they're parting as friends now, rather than Northstar parting in anger. So there has been a development in terms of feelings between Northstar and his erstwhile team members. And Heather thinks as she comes aboard the plane, I wish you well, Jean-Paul. Whatever happens, don't be a stranger. So she's the last in, but it turns out someone else is missing, Rachel. She isn't aboard. And Rachel learned at the end of the previous issue that Madeline is pregnant with an unborn baby boy. And so she's all upset about the fact that it can't be her then. So what's going to become of her if she is in a timeline now where she's never born? So interestingly, Cyclops is the one to go after her in the snow. And so he goes into the ruins of the Citadel calling out for Rachel and thinks to himself, idiot girl, this may not be her fault. She should have more sense. Loki could have left booby traps. If there's any way for him to get around his word and strike at us, you can bet he'll find it. But Rachel is there and she is doing something on the ground. I'm okay, Cyclops. Figures it'll be him who'd come looking for me, she thinks to herself. I didn't mean to alarm anybody, she says. I'll only be a moment. And Cyclops thinks, the fire fountain chamber. Lord, it was so beautiful. If it was physically possible for me to cry. And Rachel is telepathically eavesdropping on Cyclops. I would. She catches it. I'll weep for us both, she thinks. Daddy. So Claremont wringing the pathos out of this meeting between the pair. But we're going to get something of a resolution of Rachel's upset feelings. She's thinking here, my mom was Jean Grey, the woman he loved. Only, in this reality, she died. He fell in love with Madeline Pryor. They're married. She's going to have his baby, a son. My kid brother. The world I came from, the life I led, that's gone. I'll never forget, but I also can't ever go back. Here is where I exist. Now is the time that's important, and my future is whatever I decide to make it. So she's coming to a kind of like an emotional acceptance of the situation. Cyclops puts his hand I thought it was on her shoulder, but it isn't. He says to her, Rachel, we have to go. And she says, I know, I'm ready, Cyclops. And she's thinking about whether she should tell him or not that she is his daughter. If I tell him, she thinks, I'll reopen wounds that have barely healed. I'll always remind him, and Madeline too, of what he had and what might have been. He's made peace with his ghosts. Maybe it's time I did the same with mine. And Cyclops then says something interesting to her, shows interest in her. I'm told you're from the future. A future, she says. We won't know if it's the future till we get there. And he continues and says, and by then it'll be too late, so why worry? My dad, he used to say, as long as you're alive, it's never too late. This is interesting. So the Cyclops is speaking here. My dad, he used to say, as long as you're alive, it's never too late. It's as if she picks it up from him. Did your father die in that future? All the X-Men died, she says. You remind me an awful lot of someone, he says to her. That good or bad? Good, he says as he smiles. She was very dear to me, and when she died, all the light, the joy went out of my life. A part of me will always miss her. I never imagined I'd ever be as happy and fulfilled again until I met Madeline. It isn't the same. And now they hold hands and she grabs him by the arm and hugs him. But that doesn't mean it can't be as good or maybe even better. My mom had this saying, she says, everybody deserves a second chance. Smart lady, says Cyclops. Yeah, when they made my folks, they broke the mold. And she's resolved, I'm not going to tell him. Funny, I was just thinking much the same about you, says Cyclops. All of a sudden, she thinks, I've a feeling I don't need to. So that's really interesting. Claremont building in here important developments in terms of Rachel's coming to terms with the fact that she is in a past that may not be continuous with the future that she's come from, the dystopian future that she's come from, and she's decided to put Cyclops's happiness above her own. So she's being self-sacrificing, selfless, and this is working a strange reconciliation between the pair, and it's really nicely done by Claremont. So last page now, the plane takes off, piloted by Madeline, everybody's aboard. What was Rachel doing? She was planting a flower right beside where the fire fountain once was. And Claremont's prose conclusion here is really, really well written, so it bears reading out. Minutes later, the de Havilland Otter is southward bound through the swiftly gathering storms towards warmer, gentler climes. The roar of its engines almost immediately lost in the howl of the wind. Its tire tracks already filling with snow. The grass and wildflowers that carpeted the shoreline perish with the first gusts of Arctic air. In due course the citadel will vanish as well. No sign will be left to mark the battle waged on this spot, save one, a defiant patch of life amidst Loki's desolation. A reminder that humanity alone carries within itself the power to create paradise on earth on its own terms, by its own efforts, without the gifts or machinations of greedy gods, which for better or worse is how it should be. That's a great ending from Claremont. Really, really well written. Interesting, a philosophically interesting crossover between the X-Men and Alpha Flight. Like, who would have predicted that? So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this part 2 review of X-Men and Alpha Flight number 2. That concludes the 2-issue miniseries by Chris Claremont, Paul Smith, and Bob Wiacek inking, but a few beautiful pages by Barry Windsor-Smith as well. Let me know your thoughts on this issue, this section of the comic in the comments section to the video. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube and share it. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.